Perfect. Welcome everybody to the industry workshop.
Okay, so I guess a little bit about us. Sorry. My name is Catherine. I'm a senior studying computer science. In the past, I interned at Airbnb and Two Sigma, some on-campus, some on-campus organizations I'm part of include CSUA, which is hosting this event, UPE, a comp sci organization, CSM, which is a teaching club, and also I've been TAing in the past, and I recently got involved with some research in Berkeley AI Research Lab.
Hello everybody, my name is Alex. You can see me here at my favorite dessert shop, Menchie's in North Berkeley. I'm currently a 5th-year master's student studying EECS. I did my undergrad here at Berkeley as well. Some places I've interned were General Electric, Facebook, Instagram. I've been a TA in the past, both and currently for 618 and 88, and I'm also involved with like CSUA, UPE, and CSM. CSUA standing for Computer Science Undergrad Association. UPE's, I forget what the letters stand for, but it's like a CS Honor Society, and CSM being Computer Science Mentors. And I currently do some research in computer science education.
Hi everyone, my name is Sneha. I'm a junior and I'm studying EECS in business. I've worked at SAP as a technical product manager. I was an ML developer at University of California, San Francisco. And I am currently a software engineering intern at a nonprofit called Girl Effect. In terms of organizations on campus, I'm involved obviously with CSUA. I'm also involved with another organization on IEEE, which is similar to CSUA, but more so on the EE side, hence EECS, and I'm also involved with a data science for social good club called Data Good. I currently do research at the Haas Business School, where I am looking at reverse engineering the human brain to learn more so about like brand strategy and how we can really understand consumers. Very cool. Talk to me if you want to learn a little bit more about how to apply CS skills in different domains. But yeah, I guess we can go ahead and get started. So the first topic I guess we're going to talk about is resumes. So resumes are a pretty important thing when you're talking about recruitment for really anything. They're viewed for on average around 6 seconds, according to a study reported by Time. And recruiters such as like Facebook University Recruiter, Amazon, all of these really big companies, as well as startups, or not startups, excuse me, these really large companies receive hundreds of resumes by email daily. Coupled with that, with things like LinkedIn or Handshake, or really just a resume drop online, they have a lot of different resumes to look at and a lot of different candidates to select from for internships or full-time opportunities. So CS skills are currently now a commodity, meaning that almost anyone with enough skills can be switched for anyone else. So it's really important to advocate for yourself and really demonstrate why you are a unique candidate. And resumes are one way to do that. So typically there are, on average, around 4 to 6 interviewees per job opening. And this is more so for like smaller companies. So it's really important to try to advocate for yourself again, to stand out. And around 80% of resumes are rejected quickly for quickly fixable mistakes, such as spelling errors, white space, so on and so forth. And today we're going to talk a little bit about things that you can do to elevate your resume.
So some more features of a good resume. The general tip is to just try to keep it simple. So mainly make sure your resume is only 1 page, make sure there's professionality in terms of using a professional email. Your Berkeley email probably works, as well as making sure there's no mistakes, spelling or grammar errors on your resume, and essentially keeping a clear focus in terms of the story you're telling of your resume with the different projects you put on there, the different experiences you have, and make sure to highlight important information such as contact information. Make that clearly visible at the very top. Some stuff to exclude include photos of yourself. Fun fact, over 88% of resumes with photos are rejected. I think in the beginning, especially if you're a freshman, it's okay to keep some relevant high school experiences until you get to build up some projects that are done in college. But as a whole, try to keep away any filler experiences. It might be even better just to expand on what you currently have than to add extra filler experiences. And I think as a general rule of thumb, try to exclude personal achievements / stuff not really relevant to whatever job you're currently applying for. So some other facts is most recruiters toss resumes that are longer than a page with typos, and over 3/4 of resumes are rejected for an unprofessional email. So just making sure that you get these small things right should help a lot, and just keeping it simple overall.
Nice. And then some things to put on your resume. I think the strongest thing you can project when you apply to any position is the fact that you're a student at Berkeley, either maybe like studying CS or whatever, things that you're studying that be like data science or cognitive science, or math or stats, and that the recruiters will want to see that like you're studying here at Berkeley. They'll also want to see when you're graduating. So make sure that those information are like at the top of your resume, and then the academic record may include like the class you've taken that are relevant to the positions you're applying to. Going from there, I think any experience you have. So the experience kind of like the best experiences if you have like past internship experience, and kind of going from there, maybe like any research experience, TA experience, job experience, things like that. And then projects that you've worked on, either projects, personal projects are like definitely best. After that, any like school projects that you're especially proud of that you've worked on, and any leadership positions that you have within clubs. And then I think the biggest thing is you definitely want to swap out any high school experience you have for college experience as soon as you can on your resume. Initially, when you're like starting off as a freshman, you probably don't have that many things to put in from college. But as soon as you get more involved on campus, you can swap all your high school experience.
Yeah, so the header of the resume is something that is really, really important. And something to consider is putting your name very bold and clear and large at the top. So then that way you, recruiters are able to see who you are. Make sure to have different contact information nearby, such as your email, such as perhaps a phone number. Some people choose to include like an address, but I would recommend not to include that just because it might be a little bit too much personal information. In addition, make sure to include like things like your email, again, phone number, and especially your GitHub, if you're looking for more so software-oriented project or, internships or full-time opportunities. A GitHub is also really important. And then make sure to add your LinkedIn. I would highly, highly recommend for anyone in here, if you don't already have a LinkedIn that is up to date, definitely make one. Perhaps even include like a personal website if you're interested in web development or putting one together. And again, don't include your address.
Cool. Some stuff that you should put in terms of your education. This should also typically be near the top, since this is some quick facts about you. You should include your degree. So this involves if you're studying computer science, for example, you could put BA in computer science or EECS or whatever major you're currently pursuing. I think there's no hard rule of what how high your GPA needs to be in order to put it on your resume. I would say if you feel comfortable with your GPA, you can throw it on your resume. I've heard the figure, if it's higher than 3.0, put it on your resume. I think it should be fine if you leave it off too. Usually there's not hard requirements on GPAs for most companies. I would also list your intended graduation year and month or season. For example, spring 2021 is my intended graduation year and season. If you're intending to graduate early, you can put in an earlier date. This is why typically we just put the end graduation year and season. In addition, also near the top, you should list any relevant coursework that you've done. So this will probably involve computer science courses mostly, maybe EE or math or any other relevant classes to whatever you're applying to. And make sure you list the names, not the numbers, because even though a lot of recruiters might be familiar with Berkeley, they probably don't have all of the course numbers memorized. You can also shorten some course names too. For example, like structure and interpretation of computer programs is super long. You can probably just write computer programs. And also near the top, you should put any honors or awards you've gotten. For example, any scholarships you currently have active in Berkeley, any honor societies you're a part of, etc.
I think one important thing that I recommend every resume has like a skills section. So I think one important thing is to have like programming languages and like technologies like libraries you worked with, like Unix terminal command lines, things like that. The reason that it's important is like, okay, like you probably like it might be straightforward to tell that you know these things from like the class you've taken or the products you worked on, but some like companies as a basic filtration they actually like take your resume and like turn it all into just like text file, scan, and they search for keywords like Python or Java or C. And sadly, if you don't have these keywords present, then you might just like be filtered out at that initial resume filtration stage. I think that's a good thing to have, and just like a nice place, like say, like, okay, these are all the things I know that, and then you can also update these skills per job. Like if you know you're applying maybe like a front end job, you can maybe like talk more about like your website skills and things like that. Make sure that's highlighted in your skills section. Versus maybe a back end job, you can maybe highlight your scripting or your C or like other or your operating system skills.
Yeah, so once you do have a little bit of experience, it's important to format it in a way that is understandable and readable to anyone, regardless of whether they have technical experience or not. Here are just a couple of key questions to consider when you include your experience in your resume. So for example, is your relevant experience interesting? Is it unique to you? Has anyone else done this in the same way? Is it relevant? Meaning that is it relevant to the specific jobs that you're applying to? Did you solve a problem? Is your solution modern? Another really important aspect is, did I make an impact? What was my contribution to the project? And this is especially important to consider because a lot of the times during recruiter screens, which we'll talk about in a little bit, a lot of behavioral questions focus on your work, your workflow, as well as contributions that you made, as opposed to your physical technical skills. And your technical skills will be assessed in the technical interview. So making sure to highlight that is important. Other important things include your specific role, if it had a name. So maybe it's a software engineering intern, maybe you were a developer, maybe you were a manager intern, so on and so forth. What company or lab that you worked at, how long the work was. So was it over the summer? Was it over a semester or whatever it may be? And a description. And we'll touch a little bit about the description later.
So some experience that you can put on your resume that is non-internship stuff, since you've got to have a resume before your first internship, includes if you do any teaching computer science. So this can be anything from being an academic intern to a class, which usually you can get an academic intern position the semester after you take the class. If you're in any teaching clubs, for example, computer science mentors, or if you're officially on core staff, if you have a tutor role or a TA role, you can put all of that stuff on your resume. In addition, you can put any IT work that you're doing. For example, I know there are a few jobs where you can do IT work for the university by managing servers or websites. You can put any relevant non-internship experience on your resume too.
And then like when you do talk about your experience, you want to use some like active action words. And then I'm gonna send a quick link in the chat. This is the Career Center's guide on like writing a resume. Cover letter. Cover letters aren't important for internships. Specifically on the 5th page, it has like a massive list of like different action words based on like teaching, technical, creative, all sorts of skills. So I definitely recommend you all check that out. And then when you do talk about things, it's really great if you can like quantify your skills. So maybe like if you say like, okay, I wrote tests during my internship, or I wrote tests for internship. I want to specify like maybe like dozens of tests, hundreds of tests. Maybe like if you had an improvement of like how much something faster is, you say like it's 2 times as fast, 3 times as fast. Like machine learning project, and like mention like the accuracy in terms of percent, things like that. If you like quantify your resume, it's nice because like, well, then it sounds a little bit more legit if there's like a number behind it, as well as it breaks up the monotony of just like being a wall of text for your resume. Avoid words like I, me, we on your resume, and then I think those like the big ones, right? We talk about the skill sections, like the technologies you work with. Also, in each of the experience, you'll specify like, okay, I wrote integration tests with Python, or I have used this machine learning library, or this front end framework, things like that. And then when we talk about organizations, you can then mention kind of like like what you've done and like what value you provide like the community at large.
So projects are another thing that you can include in your resume, especially if you have any sort of personal projects that you worked on. When you're writing about projects on your resume, include the impact that you made with whatever project that you created, as well as different technologies that you used, whether it be APIs or just tools in general, as well as how you created that impact and value. And in terms of creating projects, I believe that we had a personal projects workshop, so you can check that out for more detail, but just a couple of high level things. Pick a project based on your passions or what you're interested in. Personal projects are personal, hence the name personal projects. Make sure to use or try to use cool or interesting technologies that you really care about, and make sure that your projects are impact and results oriented, so that during an interview you can talk about it and you can talk about why you're excited in that project, things that you learned from it, as well as future steps.
So another section you can have on your resume is leadership or any extracurriculars. So this involves, again, if you're a TA or any department leadership, you can put that on. Any student organizations that you're a part of, you don't need to necessarily be leadership in these student organizations. You can put them on as extracurriculars, as long as you remember to try to expand on what you worked on. And you can, these are usually important because they demonstrate your ability to work in teams, and also your communication skills, which are actually very important for the recruiting process.
Here's my resume. Except putting your GPA, I actually put my GPA, but everything else is the same way I present to recruiters. Right, just like I mentioned before, like I highlight my education first because that's like the first thing that recruiters care about. They want to see that I go to Berkeley, things like that. I'll put some like links to the top with my name in like nice big font, link to my GitHub, my LinkedIn, my phone number, which has also been anonymized, and my email. Yeah, y'all can also feel free to reach out to me, email if you have any questions about this resume. The template, it's kind of a funny story. This template, I think, is from like 1980 something, and it's a LaTeX template that's older than me. So LaTeX is good to use for resume. Word is fine too. I recommend just finding a template online and building off that. I'm gonna try to put chronologically within my work experience, my leadership and project section. Try to make it chronological. I try to put like numbers and quantify things I've done. And like when you get this as a PDF, all the links are clickable. So like my LinkedIn, GitHub, and like the different GitHub links within the resume are all clickable. So it's definitely not like the best resume, but I'm proud of it. And hopefully, especially if you're working on a resume, you can use this as a source of inspiration.
So the next topic that we're going to talk about are interviews. Oh, sorry, I cut you off, Catherine.
Oh, no worries. That was all I was gonna say.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, cool. So I'll start off by talking about kind of the interview timeline, mostly about technical interviews right now. So every single company has a pretty different timeline in terms of what the recruiting pipeline kind of looks like, but this is kind of a general framework. So for most places, they'll most likely start off by giving you an online coding challenge in which you don't have to talk to anyone. They'll give you some sort of website, usually like I think there's some on HackerRank. There's a few other websites where they give you a problem, they give you some interactive code typing place, and you'll solve usually 61A/61B level problems on this platform like HackerRank. You can usually choose what language you want to use. They'll usually have some test cases. It's kind of like 61A low-key, and you can test your code against the test cases. And this is often used as the first step to filter candidates, where if you pass all of the test cases, you have a pretty good shot of moving to the next round. Oftentimes there's tests that are kind of tricky to pass, like making sure your code is efficient enough. You don't necessarily need to pass all of the tests to move on to the next round, but this is kind of the first filtering step. And usually it's just like a link, you click on it and you'll get something like 1 to 3 hours to work on it. The next step is usually a recruiter screen, where if you do well enough on the coding challenge, you might hop on a call with a recruiter. There's sometimes recruiters like assigned to you, assigned to the whole school, etc. And during these recruiter screens, it's usually a pretty short phone call where you want to pitch kind of the story in your resume and why you're interested in the company. Usually these are purely non-technical, other than them maybe asking about your experiences. The next and first technical interview in this stage is often a phone interview where someone will call you and you might code on a Google Doc or some other website, collaborative code sharing website. Here, you need to make sure you're able to describe your approach to the problem very well. So my biggest tip for here is to learn how to vocalize your problem-solving abilities because you want to talk through your interview or through whatever you're thinking. And sometimes here you might be asked kind of trivia like CS questions. I've gotten questions about like, what would be the best data structure to do this task and what is the runtime? So these questions that are usually answered in 61B. And next, we didn't really write this, but next there's usually an on-site or this semester probably a virtual on-site, which will be a longer interview. Typically, I think it's 1 hour per on-site interview. Sometimes there's several back-to-back ones. Some companies like Google will do 2 back-to-back virtual on-site interviews where, yeah, the best advice maybe is to do leak code problems. These will probably have more algorithmic components involved. So sometimes it'll involve stuff that you'll learn in CS 170, although that class is definitely not a requirement. So a lot of these algorithms or strategies are found in common leak code problems. So that could be useful practice for that, or any books like Cracking the Coding interview. And same tips as for a phone interview, you want to make sure you're able to vocalize your problem-solving strategies really well. And then I think usually last there's a behavioral interview where if you pass all the technical portions, they'll ask you questions about your experience, company values. Neha will talk more about the behavioral interview in a bit. Well, so some technical interview prep, some good resources that you can access are, I mentioned LeetCode, that's at leetcode.com. That's a website where there's a bunch of different common algorithm/technical interview questions. I think they even have categories by company sometimes where you can work on solving those in any language you want. There's another website, dailycodingproblem.com, where you can also get access to more technical interview type problems. You might have heard of Cracking the Coding interview. This book describes a lot about, there's like some glossary information on like different data structures as well as kind of what to study. There's also in-person resources such as mock interviews. I know UPE offers some virtual now, mock interviews where someone in UPE will pretend to interview you some problem. You'll work through the interview process and they'll give you some feedback, which I found really helpful. There's also a website, interviewing.io. Alex has a comment about dailycodingproblem.com in the chat, which says, well, if you sign up for their email list, they will send you an interview problem every day. So you can practice every day. That's super fun. So some general tips is to memorize basic data structures, essentially just what you learn in 61B. You don't need anything too fancy. And the runtimes of operations. I've gotten a lot of questions about, try to solve this problem. What data structure would you use? How long would your algorithm take? And that is a lot faster to figure out when you know the runtimes of basic data structure operations. For example, adding or removing items. Try to remember some common algorithms. A lot of places ask dynamic programming type questions, which is just, if you haven't taken 170 yet, it's like tree recursion, but actually fast. So those questions show up a lot in LeetCode too. And definitely, I think my biggest tip, just learn to vocalize your problem-solving strategies. When you're doing LeetCode, you can just talk to yourself and pretend you're doing an interview to talk through what you're thinking of, since interviewers will oftentimes give you hints if they're able to know where you're currently at.
Another important aspect of just interviewing in general is getting really good at behavioral interviews. With technical interviews, you can definitely practice on LeetCode or any of the resources that Catherine mentioned. Behavioral interviews are a different type of practice. Unfortunately, there's not just one website where you can grind behavioral interview questions. So it takes a little bit of brain power in a different sense to really come up with some really great answers to a lot of the common questions that you'll get. So something important to consider is to craft your story. So for example, why did you choose to major in XYZ? How have your past experiences shaped you into who you are? And what are you looking forward into the future? This is a great way to frame your elevator pitch, quote unquote, to whether it be a recruiter, whether it be to an engineer, so on and so forth. to get them to understand, hey, my name is whatever your name is, and I'm majoring in this, and this is what I'm really passionate about, and this is why I'm passionate about it. And as a result, I think I make a really great addition to your company for these reasons. And by that, and by having a really great story crafted out and a compelling story, you're able to compel engineers or recruiters to want you more on their team. In addition, it's important to know your resume inside and out. Aside from your standard, sorry, my notifications keep going off. But it's important to know your resume inside and out, not only on the technical side, but as well as knowing your resume in terms of what types of work ethic did you put into? What are some examples of leadership that you showed throughout the project? Were there any difficulties or challenges? How did you really solve those challenges? And by focusing on tangible scenarios, you're able to craft, again, the story and show why you'd be a best fit for that company. Tying all of this in, it's important to understand different company values and try to integrate them into your answers. So I would strongly recommend prepping like a short little document that goes over classic answers to your questions, or just a short document documenting all of your experiences and just key scenarios that you can really talk about in your behavioral interview. So this is an example of a reference doc that I created, but I anonymized it a lot. So I have like a storyline that you can use. So like, for example, I'm Neha, I'm an Easton business major, and something that I'm really passionate about is bridging this gap between technology and accessibility. And then from there, I would go into my experiences working in like the nonprofit sector, learning and why I'm interested in like nonprofit companies, for example. Then I would talk about each of my experiences, and I'd say, here I worked as whatever, like a software developer, a product manager, so on and so forth. And I talk about why I chose that specific company and what I wanted to get out of it. And then from there, I have this really great document that I can reference anytime where I'm trying to have a behavioral interview. And because sometimes you forget about situations that happened back in like in high school or like your freshman year when you're a junior. So it's important to have some sort of like documentation so that you can refer back to it.
So next thing is like, okay, have a resume made, had it reviewed by a couple people. I'm ready to start applying. How do I apply? Where do I find internships to apply for? You'll find out right now. So I think like the best thing you could do, and also like it's really hard to do this, is get referrals. That's maybe like if you have like friends who are working either full time or interned at the company before, they can refer you to that company, and then that's like a great way like bypass like initial resume screen. Or just get like your foot in the door in the part of the interview process. But like those are hard to come by and they're pretty rare. So can't really possibly get an internship or a position without it. Next thing is I think handshake.berkeley.edu. It's like Berkeley's kind of career website where a bunch of different companies have different job postings, both for on-campus jobs and for just like regular internships. The great thing is like usually it's like a Berkeley specific app with a Berkeley specific recruiter, or not usually, some of the times. So that is really good. Jumpstart.me, it's a pretty new website that has like a bunch of internship positions as well that you can apply for. LinkedIn.com, it's like pretty good too. You can filter on site search criteria. It's really a numbers game. It's I think especially like if you can get like really quality applications out there, that's great. But especially if you're a freshman trying to apply for, I think it's definitely a quantity over quality sort of type of thing. And then like this link right here, you just search like GitHub summer 2021 internships. Like you'll find this like bunch of different like master lists and how like 100 like companies are all like pretty well known. They like link directly to the application. So that's a great resource to use as well. So definitely just apply a bunch and then you can use all these resources. And then there might be more of that. Also, the subreddit, reddit.com/r/CS majors also aggregates some nice links. So I think those are resources that I've used in the past.
So once you've decided all of the different companies that you want to apply to, whether it be through any of the links that Alex mentioned or career fairs or really anything, it's important to stay organized so that you can keep track of all of your different applications and make sure that you are keeping track of all of your interview dates. So one way to do this is to create a spreadsheet to keep track of all of your different applications. So I put a screenshot of an example of what I do. And this is using an application online called Notion, but you can use like a Google Doc, you can use a Google spreadsheet, you could use Excel, really anything that will help you keep track of all of the different interviews that you are doing. So for example, the really nice thing about Notion is that you can put in different files and like links. So I have like the current resume that I'm using, a cover letter template that I use for when I'm writing cover letters for companies, and my portfolio website. And then from there, I keep track of all of the different companies that I'm applying to, what stage of applying am I at? So have I applied somewhere? Have I messaged the recruiter? Have I gotten referred, rejected, followed up, offered, so on and so forth? You can see the due dates of all of the different applications. I plug in like whatever resume that I'm using or whatever cover letter, or really just any other information that you want to put in. Sometimes during interviews, I'll create a page just based on that company, talking about like different company values and situations where I really like portray that company value, like teamwork or something like that. And then that's a really awesome way that you can have this open during a virtual interview, for example, and make sure that you're hitting all of the key points.
All right, cool. So I think that's all we had prepared. We can probably stop recording here, and yeah, if you have any questions.
Let's see, stop recording.